You're listening to the Cinema Snarks podcast. I'm Larry,
And I'm Ren.
and today we are going to tell you how we really feel about the 2022 Academy Awards and those Best Picture nominees. So it's been about a week that we could digest all that happened at the Oscars this year. A lot happened. One of the most talked about Oscars, I would say, probably since at least the Moonlight La La Land debacle, and of course,
It wasn't that
eclipsed
long
that.
ago.
Yeah,
Eclipsed it fully.
eclipsed pretty much anything, in honesty, that the Oscars has ever seen. But last few years, the main story about the Oscars has been how those ratings continued to dwindle away. And
They went up this year.
a slap brought them back up to up a little bit.
They were already up a little bit, right?
Up a
We were
little
already
bit.
watching it.
But I really think those DVR numbers and stuff after everybody ran to their TVs to see what the hell was going on when they caught
Probably.
news. They were like, "Oh my God, what's going on that show? I need to turn it on. We need to."
Oh my God.
Plus, we all knew Will Smith would be winning Best Actor. That was pretty much everyone's prediction. Not too long after that, so even if you missed the slap moment in real time, you were like, "Oh my God, okay, how is this going to go down when he wins?"
I didn't know he was going to win Best Actor. So after it happened, I texted Larry and said, "Oh my God, what if he wins Best Actor?" And
I was like,
Larry,
"Girl, it's a foregone
he will.
conclusion. It's over. He won. He's going to win."
So incredible. I mean, okay. So yeah, I mean, that's probably one of the most iconic moments. Chris Rock said it immediately. Greatest television moments in history. Immediately he went, holy shit. I do have to commend Chris Rock. I think he did an incredible job of keeping his shit together, of moving on, of taking a breath, and not just, yeah, I mean, the show must go on, and I think he did a good job of recovering from I mean, not only did he get slapped, right, that in itself is shocking, he got slapped by Will Smith at the Oscars while he was on stage in the middle of his performance. That's a whole other level. I can't think of anything that is anywhere near this level of shocking and just mind-boggling that has ever happened on live TV before. I mean, I guess there was the Janet Jackson boob thing, but even that was clearly planned and had a pasty. So it was this is just I
thought it was a joke to begin. I definitely thought it was a bit.
An unplanned bit.
Until Will Smith sat down and cussed him the hell out, and they had to bleep it all, and they were clearly running in circles trying to figure out what to do.
So obviously we had to talk about it because we are the Cinema Snarks. This is the hot goss of the entire
I will say,
show.
I mean, I feel like on this show, Ren is a little bit more snarky, but I am the one who advocates violence a lot quicker. So
yes, I am the violence is never the answer person.
I'm listen. Anybody can catch hands at any time. Let this be a lesson to be prepared. Okay.
I think that's the difference. I may be more snarky, and that is why I'm no, you cannot smack me. That's unacceptable. I use my words.
I know. See, Ren is. That's why she's anti-violence, because people be ready to jump up and slap her a lot quicker than they will me most of the time. But
and I well, at the end of the day, I'd rather have a strong mind than strong muscles.
I think, and this week has just been exhausting. If you're on Twitter, it's just been exhausting. Of course, the Academy came out with their bullshit response of, "We don't condone the violence." And it's
well, first of all of your films. Second of all of the many, many people who are violent and have gotten awards. Horrifyingly violent.
Stop, Academy. If this were a watershed moment, I would be all for it. If we could just start going through that Academy members list and start expelling people left, right, and center, this would be great. This would be monumental in all the right ways.
The Oscars doesn't condone violence at the Oscars. That should have been the amendment there.
We can't even say while it's on camera because Ezra Miller is still a member and he got caught camera choke slamming a fan
Correct.
to the
At
ground. So,
the
or they got
actual
choke
Oscars.
slammed.
Yeah. At
Yeah,
the
no, it's
actual
literally
Oscars.
only at our award show do we not condone. Any other time, sexually
No.
assault people, threaten to kill people, choke slam them, whatever. That's fine. Just don't do it on our stage.
Right.
Yeah.
I mean, okay, I do have to say that like it is still like the most it is like this, talk about the ratings going down. It's still the most televised award show for film. It's the NFL of movies. Like there's a lot of people watching all at once, which I think was another part of what was so incredibly shocking about it. Is that it was so it was that, and it was the fact, this is what I keep saying, is I might be a little bit more understanding if Will Smith had been right next to Chris Rock and then just hauled back and slapped him and didn't like think about it. But he had so many seconds from getting up out of his chair, getting up on the stage, walking all the way over to him, and then slapping him, that it was like there was too much time for him to have a new rational thought in his brain of like, don't do this, man. This is a bad idea. And like, whatever you want to say about like, I agree. Like, let's not talk about Black women's hair. Let's not give our opinions on it. I understand that like alopecia, while not the worst medical condition a person could suffer from, is also fucking horrible. Like I've had like bald patches in my life in my hair because of extreme stress, and it's mortifying. It's not fun, and losing your hair is very, very difficult for men who are allowed to be bald, and it's especially difficult for women who suffer from alopecia, and like we are expected to have so much of our identity tied into our hair. It's such a big deal for us. So I can understand like there's a lot of emotions tied to it, and I'm sure that Will Smith has seen her in some very, very vulnerable places to do with her hair. First of all, she looks fucking great. She is a gorgeous woman, whether she has her cornrows or her hair
straight
just
and down,
completely
the little
gone.
Cut she had in the 90s, set it off
she
style.
looks incredible. I would not, I didn't know. Okay, because I am just a person who is absorbs a lot of media. I kind of assumed that she shaved her head because she was probably having issues with alopecia. And I know it's like a more common thing in the African-American community among women. So I kind of assumed, but like, I didn't know that it was a thing that she had talked about, that it was like publicly known knowledge, but I kind of assumed that. But I also don't think necessarily everyone should know, but you know who should have fucking known? Chris Rock should have known.
Pretty sure.
Chris Rock should have known. He made a documentary about Black women's hair.
And they know each other. Like they're not new to each other's lives.
I mean, I also think he didn't intend it to be a dick.
I don't either.
I mean, like it wasn't like he said G.I. Jane was hot. Demi Moore with her like bald head was hot. It was like a big deal. It was a huge cultural touchstone.
Listen, I just want to know how Ricky Gervais didn't get slapped all them years, several years hosting the Oscars.
Yeah,
and I'm like,
way more offensive shit.
I would have slapped the hell out of Ricky Gervais first, but that's just me.
I think like people would have had something to say about it instead of being like, good on Chris Rock for not freaking out. People would have been like upset at Chris Rock for being like insensitive. If Will Smith had not gotten up and completely
I mean, Chris Rock would have definitely, especially like when they panned to Jada and we saw her face was unamused, people would have Chris Rock would have came out looking the bad person if he hadn't got slapped. Now it's a little bit more divided.
Yeah,
it's pretty divided.
Honestly, I also think Jada could have responded better to it. Like again, she's allowed to have her own emotional attachment to it, but like she is rocking that bald head, and she could have responded to a joke about it with joy, with like, stupid. Yeah, look at my hot fucking head, instead of getting like upset about it. And again, we are allowed to feel our feelings. She's allowed to feel her feelings, and it's clearly still something that she like emotionally struggles with. And maybe Chris Rock didn't realize that. Maybe Chris Rock assumed that she was like and does talk about it as if it is like this empowering thing, and she like made this strong decision for herself. But obviously, there's still some pain attached. It exploded in a very, very strong, a surreal moment in our.
We all witnessed Oscars history. Sunday night. It was historic in maybe the worst way possible, but it was still historic. Now, this week, obviously, the Academy came forward and said, we're going to review it. We're not going to take his Oscar because that was a talk immediately after. It was like,
no, because Harvey Weinstein still has his Oscars, so that's
no,
for life. Apparently,
we're not taking Oscars from him.
Never take that away
because there's plenty of people again.
However, Vanessa Williams did one naked spreadsheet on Playboy, and they took away her Miss America crown. No problem.
So
we'll take
stupid.
those away.
Yeah, that can get snatched quick.
Yeah.
But Will Smith came forward after apologizing and did resign from the Academy.
He did, which doesn't mean he's not in. It doesn't mean he's ineligible to win. Yeah. It just means he can't vote anymore, and he can't go to the. I think it means he can't go to the ceremony. But
which, I mean, you know, I'm a little bit more happy with him doing it himself than the Academy, just because, like we said, they have such a long history of harboring, like basically protecting abusers.
Yes.
They protected Harvey Weinstein for decades. Let's just be very clear. And they wouldn't have outed him if they weren't forced to out him and you know, shun him. They never would have done it. I mean, Woody Allen is still chilling. Kevin Spacey is still a member of the Academy. You know, a lot of
not those criminal charges actually go through. If it's plausible deniability, they can keep going with it.
Yeah, they're still good.
I will also say, I think this is an interesting sort of thing here in our current place. Is it seems to me like Will Smith, from his statements that have been released and his actions since then, he does genuinely seem like he regrets his decision. He regrets his actions. He regrets his decision and regrets what he has done. However, people will say, "Oh, it's just PR. It's just written by his PR." And like, obviously, yes, obviously, he had a public relations firm go over his statement because he is a celebrity. And but the thing is, like, it doesn't matter what he says at this point. Like, just because he's a celebrity, people are going to but a certain segment of the population is going to assume that it is disingenuous, whether or not it is. Even if it is disingenuous, the actions speak for me in terms of like, he has put out apologies and things like that. I think there's also something to be said again for Chris Rock. It's just like not wanting to prosecute and not wanting to or to press any charges. And I read according to backstage right afterwards and said, I just got slapped by Muhammad Ali.
According to who was it? Diddy said that they literally squashed it at the Oscars. It was over. At the ceremony.
I think it's again, if it was a thing that had happened not on live television in the middle of an award ceremony,
nobody would have blinked an eye. I mean, we would have been a little shocked that Will Smith clapped.
TMZ article that like happened for a minute, but like it was the shock of it because, and you know, the Oscars has such a veneer of importance, right? Like they really sell the delusion.
They're not the Golden Globes, which are known as the trashy movie one. They're not the Grammys, which people get ham. They're not the VMAs or any of them. No, they are the prestige.
Correct. And the other thing is, it also would have been more like, I don't think anybody would have cared as much. Like, I mean, we might have still had a conversation about like whether or not violence is ever acceptable, which is like a whole big fucking conversation. But like, I think what was really shitty about it is like, it just cast a pall, an awkwardness over the rest of the evening, and it made it shitty. And that was one of the things that he like acknowledged immediately. Will Smith did, that he had basically kind of ruined the night for everyone else who worked really hard and deserved their Oscar moment. All those people, like, it's a fucking shame. Like Questlove.
Somebody mentioned it. Like, there's a lot of people who don't need the exposure or whatever, but there are so many at the Oscars, like the short filmmakers, Questlove. There are so many people, these makeup artists, these visual effects artists who don't get recognized. Nobody really pays attention.
Jessica Chastain, who has like been nominated a bunch of times, and this is her first Oscar, and like she finally got a thing. And also like The Eyes of Tammy Faye was not universally loved. Tons of people didn't see it. It is getting some more play. I will refer you to our list of underrated films for 2021, which I listed The Eyes of Tammy Faye. But I think it's because it's on streaming services now. People are actually like watching it and enjoying it. I think people acknowledged it a lot more for what it was. And now it won a couple of Oscars, but that's like significant. And like, so that goes into also the whole conversation of like, why do we even give a shit about the Oscars? Because there's tons of people who just want to like, they're trash the entire Oscar thing. And at the end of the day, I can't trash the entire Oscar thing.
And we talked about that a lot earlier in our podcast this year, but it
Why
really
do we care?
yeah, it's not about, you know, patting these rich famous people on the back. For film fans, that's not really why we care about the Oscars, is all of that. It's about these people who don't get shine anywhere else, who their movies have been seen by very few folks that they worked so hard on, and the Oscars suddenly propels that film for people to watch it, for people to appreciate these amazing films that otherwise get like no play, nobody cares.
Which also is part of what makes me really fucking irritated about the way that they approach all of the animated films. And with that, Larry, I think we can segue away from Will Smith and all of that, and let's talk about some other things. We're mostly just going to do our rankings because
we're going to rank the best picture nominees.
Who were in one of the best pictures, involved with one of the best pictures, except for the animation category.
Never or hardly ever finds a way to get into the best picture. And that's my other thing, as we talked about it before too, is you look at this list, it's a bunch of period pieces, a bunch of biopics, the usual, a lot of dramas get into best picture. We very rarely, I think it's still 3 animated films in the history of Best Picture that have ever gotten a Best Picture nomination.
Beauty and the Beast got nominated for Best Picture. People lost their shit about a cartoon getting nominated for Best Picture. And then they invented the animation category, and thus was born the Pixar Award every year.
And it is interesting because at first it didn't start that way. We'll say that like Spirited Away opened us up early with some promise that okay, they're gonna really do it, and then it just turned into Pixar Disney only. Then I believe it's 2 or 3 films not from Disney Pixar who have won this award. Spider-Man Into the Spider-Verse, Rango. I think Shrek was the first one that ever won it. So there's been a very little handful, the last being Spider-Man Into the Spider-Verse, that broke through. And it's otherwise Disney Pixar have a monopoly on the best animated feature.
Yeah, well, and a lot of the time it's barely that it breaks through. It's like Pixar didn't release a film that year, or Pixar's film was like a big bomb, or for whatever reason, or like it doesn't seem like it's that movies beat Pixar. It's that Pixar drops the ball for a year, which sucks. And it's just a big deal because you've also heard plenty of the Oscars voters and judges talk about how they don't actually watch them. And I did not watch the ceremony live because I am a millennial and I don't have antenna and I don't watch real TV.
Academy, that's why your viewership is down. Not because you present all of the awards. It's because you have not adapted to make your show accessible to anyone who's not over the age of like 60 years old.
Yeah. Academy, I promise you, if you were to give me a streaming option that didn't require me to have a cable provider, I would happily, I would even pay you money to watch it because I'm that nerd.
If you do like a, not too expensive, obviously, but if you do like an Oscar stream, that's like a pay-per-view, like a cheaper, most of us that love the Oscars are going to pay to watch it.
Absolutely. So instead, I just resorted to whatever. I'm not going to like fight this. I try and fight it
here, I guess.
I had the New York Times stories just like on alert. So every time a thing came up, I got an alert. So I knew as soon as Will Smith slapped Chris Rock. And then I went and I looked at, I was like, what?
Found the clips.
Yes, right. I didn't get that. I had to look at the clips. Got to see the one with all the audio because.
We got that Australia clip. Uncensored from Australia.
But anyways, I did not hear as Larry explained to me, very condescending introduction for the animation category. Why don't you go ahead and explain it, Larry?
Yeah, I mean, they brought out 3 live-action Disney princesses. One soon to be with Haley Bailey. It's going to be the Little Mermaid, but brought her out with Lily James and Naomi Scott.
Sorry.
So we have 3 actresses who are inferior versions of their animated counterparts to the screen. I'm just going to say that. I love you, Lily James, and I love you, Naomi Scott, but you do not touch the animated versions of Jasmine and Cinderella. It just is what it is. And then they proceeded to just harp on how parents basically and adults have to endure animated films because kids love them. And it's such a chore to have to sit through them as your kids watch it. So we've all seen it.
Fucking women who have made money, their entire careers are now based around the success of animated films that adults like to watch. I'm an adult now. I fucking love rewatching The Little Mermaid and Beauty and the Beast and all of these films. And I also am an adult now and love watching new animated films because I'm not a cinematic newbie who just like doesn't appreciate the amount of time and work that goes into a movie. Just a movie. It's a movie. Especially knowing, we all know how they make animation. It's hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of hours from hundreds of animators. Like that is, give it the tiniest amount of respect.
No other film takes as long in post, nearly, as animation does. All the, you know, like because people are like, for actors, it's easy. You know, you come in, you do your voice work. They love those gigs. But all of the other people like that have to come together to make this beautiful, amazing art, moving art before our eyes is incredible. We had a very adult, a very topical documentary in this year's Best Animated Feature lineup.
There are valid reasons to use animation, and also animation is literally art. It's literally an opportunity for a person who paints, draws, creates a team of people to create a moving version of this. It's mind-boggling that this very odd myth that it's for kids persists, because animation has not been for children for a very long time. It may be often family friendly.
And honestly, if any studio, that's what kills me, is they've watched these films because they've seen Pixar. And if any studio really did a lot to bridge that gap, it's Pixar themselves. And y'all have seen these Pixar movies. Yes, they're family friendly, but Pixar really bridged the gap of adult content being in these films, things that we as adults really relate to and can empathize with and understand, and these really deep themes. The Shrek did it, but it did it in more of a comedy way of like, your kids are not going to understand these jokes, but Pixar's done it a little bit more of an empathetic way. But
let's talk, if a film like Coda can win Best Picture with its feel-good, family-friendly bent, why in the shit can't we be more respectful to an animated film that makes us cry? I just watched Seeing Red. Totally. I watched it twice and cried both times. I was only half paying attention the second time. Still cried. But like, so that is a generally infuriating.
It's so annoying that they don't put them in other categories as well. Every now and then, randomly, it'll get a screenplay nomination. But if you ask me, The Mitchells vs. the Machines had one of the 5 best original screenplays of 2021. It should have been in the original screenplay conversation, but of course, it's animated. They don't care. Also, both of us being stop motion animation fan, why are these stop motion movies not getting production design nominations? I wonder that pretty much every time Laika releases a film. I'm like, this production design is amazing and should be nominated. So what's going on?
It's just a inherent bias. So anyways, that was a rant.
Historic wins. Troy Kotsur won, first male deaf actor to win, only the second deaf actor ever to win an Academy Award. Ariana DeBose, a Afro-Latina, I believe the first one of those, only the 4th or 5th.
Openly queer.
So, good for her. Jessica Chastain and Will Smith breaking their streaks, with the drama aside, both of them had been nominated several times at this point without winning and finally got their due. And I don't know if you know this, but Jessica Chastain, I believe, is the 5th actor from The Help to go on to win an Oscar. So The Help is just producing them left and right. Octavia Spencer, Viola Davis, Jessica Chastain, Emma Stone, Allison Janney, all of them. They're just walking by and snatching up them Oscars after leaving that film. So good omen, I suppose, a good omen. But the ceremony, it still went 45 minutes long. Put the damn categories back in the show and cut out the mess. That's what I say. But
I literally, again, didn't actually watch the ceremony. I just want the awards, y'all. Just show me clips if you want of the movies, of the perform. I would rather see clips of each of the actors in their best moment. I would rather see a like 10-second clip of each actor and get rid of the stupid host. I don't care. I could care less about Amy Schumer and what she thinks is funny.
And her swinging in a Spider-Man morph suit from the ceiling.
We definitely don't need it.
We didn't want that.
I don't care. I don't want that.
We didn't need your like Academy Museum promo in here that was tried to be sold off as a comedy bit with Wanda Sykes. We didn't need that. No, honestly, and last year that was their big problem. They didn't show clips. And we were like, what the hell? This is a visual medium, like film. Yeah. You're sitting here telling us about costumes without showing us damn clips of costume designs.
They used to always do that.
It's annoying. Keep clips. Whatever you do, Academy, show us visuals because you're representing a damn visual medium. It's so dumb. But good for Coda. I'm happy for Coda.
Yeah,
but
sure. Yes.
It's a lovely little film that has caused quite the drama itself amongst many circles. Cinephiles particularly had a very anti-Coda slant heading in.
Let's get into our rankings because Coda ranked fairly decently for me, and the favorite of the cinephile community hated it. It was way down to the bottom. I don't think I hated it. I just found nothing to enjoy about it.
Well, what do you have at number 10?
My number 10, actually, the one I actually hated actively was Licorice Pizza.
Look, that's my number 10 too.
Yeah, I don't understand why it was nominated for Best Picture. It was not only really, really long and boring, it was also weird. I don't know why the necessity of the 25-year-old woman with a 15-year-old kid, that's gross. It's gross. It's gross. I know that was the point, was it's gross, so it's weird for her. It should have stayed gross and weird for her. Don't spend 3 hours. I guess that movie wasn't 3 hours. It was 2, but it felt like 3, and that is a problem. It was just this meandering mess of a film, and I often feel that way when I'm watching Paul Thomas Anderson's films, but this was the worst.
Sometimes he'll have good dialogue at least in there.
Yes.
This really didn't have that for me. Instead, we got cringy race jokes and weird moments.
So I saw somebody compare it in a review to Dazed and Confused, and they're kind of set in the same time period, and there's definitely an emphasis on music, but Dazed and Confused uses the music way better. The characters are way more likable, and
interesting.
And the conversations are interesting. They have these interesting philosophical conversations, and that's what makes Dazed and Confused an entertaining film. And at least you have interactions between the characters that keep you kind of engaged. And it only takes place over this one night. The Licorice Pizza takes place over this undisclosed
summertime,
which I don't buy at all. It was it's this one summer. I'm really? He managed to
open
have
3 businesses.
3 businesses, that were opened and failed. I'm listen, I'm a theater person. It takes a while just to get one business to let you open in a space. You can't just I guess he could theoretically have gotten the space and then he still had it, and then he just put the pinball machines in there. Whatever. He also, it was also weird because he clearly was much older than 15.
It just is. The whole thing is just so weird. I honestly would have been more intrigued by the politician storyline that comes in the third act. If we just followed this girl intern as she is in part of this politician drama, maybe that would have been more interesting.
There could have been a lot.
She's running around. She's having encounters with Sean Penn, being ridiculous. She's having encounters with Bradley Cooper, being ridiculous. She's working at a politician's office. It was just, the script is all over the place without any focus. There's no focus. I think it's supposed to be a coming of age story, but the other coming of age stories in the category dwarf this by a mile. They're so much better.
I feel super unclear what these kids' goals and aspirations are. It just seems this 15-year-old kid was just I'm an entrepreneur and I want to make money in business, and that was it. And then she was lost, and so lost to a point that like she just had no character. That was the defining characteristic of her character, was like, I don't know what I want to do with my life.
Yeah. What do you have at number 9 then, Ren?
I have The Power of the Dog.
Oh, very controversial.
I know everybody really liked Power of the Dog. I found it just incredibly boring. None of the characters are redeeming, but I was in no way blown away. I actually thought Benedict Cumberbatch's accent was kind of off, and I did not buy him in that character at all, not with his body type, his personality, his mannerisms. He was much better in Louis Wayne, and I wish he would have gotten a nomination for that movie, because that was a fucking performance. Power of the Dog was like, none of the characters were likable. Like I didn't like the wife / mother. I didn't buy the justification for how everything goes down. I didn't like the son. He's weird. I guess I'm supposed to care about them a little bit, but like, any redeeming qualities in either of these characters immediately disappear. And maybe that's like the point, is that he brings out the worst in these people or something. But I don't know. I'm also of the opinion that like, I'm gonna like a character a lot more that has some strong sense of self, enough that like, I just hate that the only woman on the screen is basically this weak-willed, pathetic woman that needs everyone to save her and has so little opinion of herself. She just evolves into an alcoholic mess. When her brother-in-law is mean to her and she's not as good as she thinks her husband wants her to be. And then like, the husband sucks too, because he wants her to be he has this like vision of her as this thing. And other than that, he's just kind of like a boring character. You don't like know that much about him. I found the whole thing incredibly long. The whole time.
Watch out, Ren. Watch out. The cinephiles are going to come after you.
bored.
Those are their least favorite the critiques, that it's cold and that it's
Great.
boring.
Well, you know what? Drive My Car is, I think, longer than Power of the Dog, or equally long. And I love Drive My Car.
Drive My Car, I think, is the longest of the bunch.
Right. And I love Drive My Car. So it's not about whether or not it's actually long. It's about whether or not it feels really long. And Power of the Dog felt really long. And even as I was watching it, I was like, ugh, this is so boring. This is so boring. Is this over yet? Oh my God, I'm only halfway through. Okay.
Oh.
Like I just found nothing enjoyable about it. I'm glad that people loved it. I'm glad that people find pieces of art that they enjoy. I found nothing to enjoy about Power of the Dog.
Well, coming in at number 9 for me is another one people really loved, and I did not, and that's West Side Story. Just from the jump, people criticize, they get mad when you're like, why was this made? What's the point of this? And who is this for? But honestly, that's the first thought for me, is why was this made? Who was this for? This story is dated. It could have been left in the 60s where it belonged, and we didn't need to revive it.
The 1500s where it
well,
belongs.
yes. Because while I will say, in many ways, Steven Spielberg is great, and he's great for a reason. In many ways, it does improve upon that original film. The camera work is gorgeous. The cinematography is very pretty. The sets, the costumes, the dance numbers look amazing. Look, from a visual standpoint, I will argue with no one that West Side Story is a well-crafted film. It looks good when you're watching it, and
I wish
kudos.
all of that would have been done in a new story, so it didn't just feel like it was a revamp of like the dances aren't even that different from the original film. Like that really cool 60s style of cinematography that was done, very cool. Would have been cooler to see in something that was like
different
set in the 60s.
Like, I kind of wish different. I know people won't like this because, they love it. In many ways, I kind of wish Steven Spielberg, maybe Damien Chazelle could have still wrote it, but I kind of wish Steven Spielberg had directed La La Land and brought in this choreography and the cinematic flair to a story like La La Land.
Yeah, because that was my complaint about La La Land, was that it was supposed to feel like an old-timey movie, but it didn't. It felt like a 2000s film.
And if you gave it this sheen, if you gave it this Spielberg cinematic touch, I think it would have elevated it.
And and the dancing had been like in that specific style, and that with that crispness and
with this talent. That's the other thing. They hired people who could sing. They hired people who could dance. They hired a lot of musical theater people for West Side Story, and you could tell.
Also, one of my big complaints always with musical theater films that they want to make is they hire subpar people because they think they need name recognition. I'm like, no,
Yeah, it's
first
just-
of all, people don't like musicals. They don't go to see musicals anymore. It's hard. They're hard
Yeah.
to sell. People have the same opinion of musicals they've now formed of like animated films, is that like it's for like musicals are for theater people and old people. They're not for me. As like animations are for kids and families, and that's it. And they just like disregard it. So it doesn't matter what you do with a musical. So you might as well make a fucking kick-ass musical with really good actors and singers. And I think that West Side Story did that. I agree.
The story. It's like, here's the problem. It looks beautiful, but it's around this rotted story to me. The story, first of all, is just, we all know, it's Romeo and Juliet set in, racist America, divided New York City. And we don't need to hear it again. I'm tired of Romeo and Juliet as a story. If you're going to do it, I know they tried to do new stuff. And then two, it doesn't work as well when you're doing it with race instead of class. That's my other thing, is that's why I don't think West Side Story works well, is that it's now about the race rather than the class. And it doesn't ring as true, first of all. And then it brings in this weird kind of patriotism, this nationalism that like America just rings real weird to me still as a song. They performed it great. And then thank you for hiring actual brown folks this time around, because hello, it's 2022, not just like kind of brown face and also people who couldn't sing themselves, so they had to be dubbed. But that's a different story in the 60s version. However, you still had them put on these thick, ridiculous Puerto Rican accents. And you were like, okay, well, we're not going to get somebody too ethnic. Her name is Rachel Zegler. She's a light-skinned brown folk, and she's really, really American and not all that ethnic. But that's a different story. And then,
well, I don't
Maria
like to gatekeep on like who's allowed, like what skin tone is allowed to be ethnic, right?
And Maria is a terrible character. I'm sorry. She
Maria
is a horrible character.
Also, they should have just cut that fucking I Feel Pretty song. It's horrible. It is horrible, especially in a 2022 setting. It made me deeply uncomfortable, and I could like see them trying to sell it somehow. And it's unacceptable.
They replaced it. So they put it in a different spot in the musical to try to make a little more like sense and not be so cringe. No, that's the thing. They changed it a little bit, but they did not change it nearly enough. Nearly enough. The whole movie. That who the hell meets a guy in one day? This is why I just can't. Who meets one man one day? The very next day, said man kills your brother, and you jump into bed with him literally moments after he tells you he just murdered your brother. Well, murdered.
At least in Romeo and Juliet, it's her cousin. It's like not quite as bad.
And then you like betray your whole family. You like turn your back on everyone. Anita's over here like traumatized as hell because her boyfriend husband just was murdered, and you're like, girl, but I love him. And like, it's just so stupid. I hate it. I hate the story. And if you come from a Latino family, I don't know nobody who's running away after you just killed their brother. Like, if there's one thing about most, including Puerto Rican cultures, by and large, not all, very family oriented culture by and large. And
so that was also one of my like things I didn't like. So in the original West Side Story, they're not Irish, they're Italian. And I know I'm Italian and blah blah blah. But I think that's like relevant to the story because Italian culture really is so similar to Hispanic culture. Like they're both very Catholic, and yes, Irish are Catholic as well. Yeah. But like there is a fieriness to both of those cultures that the Irish don't have.
It's a different kind.
They have their own thing, but I have found lots of, I've lived in Florida and I've lived in Colorado. I've found lots of places of like cultural resonance between me and other Hispanic people just because Italian cultures are so similar. They even look kind of similar. Like I normally have very dark hair, dark eyebrows, and I mean, I'm relatively pale skin, but I still have like olive tones in there. And so I've gone places where they just start talking to me in Spanish because it is a Spanish speaking area and they assume that I can speak Spanish because they are very similar. And I think that's one of the points, is that it is so ridiculous that they are at war with each other because they are so similar, and you really change it when you make them Irish, who are
Yeah.
very clearly different and they look physically different, and you have Hispanic.
Yeah, see, yeah, and I
yeah.
agree on that too.
So
it
I
just
think
doesn't
that
hit the
was
same.
the point.
It's
that
just, yeah,
missed.
no, I'm sorry. West Side Story, and can we award Latinas for more roles than just Anita every like
Yes,
50
please.
years?
Now,
Like,
to be fair, I did tell Larry before she won that she was my favorite part of that
She was.
film. I
My
thought she
mine
was
too.
the best.
actually,
and
the
her
side characters
song was the best. I Want to Come to America is like so. As my husband, Patrick, he's a third culture kid, so he basically grew up. His parents had him moving or internationally all over the world, and he has often said that like, you know, every time something goes wrong in America, and I'm like, let's go move to another country. He says every country has their own problems, and so like that's one of the things that like coming to America, that I Want to Be in America thing is about, is that like America has its problems, but like there's reasons that people immigrated here, that there is opportunities here, and the immigrants deserve those opportunities just as much as the people who immigrated 40 years earlier, right? That's the point. So Anita is also she's just a much easier to connect with character. She's got a much better journey than Stupid Maria.
Like, that's the other thing, is she's a scene stealing character. So if you get a good actress in there, she's gonna steal the show.
Her and her costumes, all her costumes were incredible.
Honestly, all of the side characters. That's the other problem with this movie. And I guess you could argue that kind of for Romeo and Juliet, but they don't really have a lot of side characters that steal the show from them.
No.
West Side Story is like built so that all of the side characters are so much more interesting, so much more like relatable. Even, you know, Homie, who leads the Irish gang, he's much better, much more interesting than freaking Ansel Elgort, like a horrible bland. They had no chemistry too, the two leads.
They did not have
zero chemistry. So then you also don't buy it. You're like, I don't think you love this man to run away with him after he murdered her.
And that's the problem, right? It seems like very clearly that he picked the actors independent of each other without like putting them in a room together and seeing like how they
I think he liked Ansel. I think Ansel was in the running like for Ready Player One and stuff. So I think he enjoyed.
They had because they had whoever ended up in Ready Player One was basically like bargain bin Ansel Elgort.
Yeah, so I don't know. It didn't work for me. But what did you have at number 8 then, Ren?
I had West Side Story.
Oh, okay, perfect. So did you have anything to add, or did you get it all out?
Nope, I got it all out there. So yeah, I didn't like. It was fine. I like musicals. It was like fine. It was fine. I think I was just mostly not. I was mostly just disappointed. I don't think I was disappointed. I knew how I was going to feel about it because it wasn't different from the original, and that was the big thing to me, was that like I didn't see the point of it. It was like do something new if you're going to remake it. Don't like literally make a new thing, right?
I know. It's like we see that Spielberg could have made a great musical. I just wish he had made an original one instead. Like make your stamp with an original amazing musical, Spielberg.
Or do a musical that hasn't been turned into a movie yet. Like
or grab one. Yeah. And you love that fantastical stuff, Spielberg. I think you would have been great for a Wicked film, but
and as somebody pointed out, it does seem like Steven Spielberg is at like the ending stages of his career where he's just doing like whatever he wants to do because he wants to do it. And like West Side Story, he's like, I love this musical. I'm just gonna do it. I'm gonna do it again.
Cool, I guess. He said he's always wanted to make a musical, so I'm glad he did it at least. And showed.
I wish he had picked a different one, but he's Steven Spielberg, and he can
do whatever he wants.
Decide to just remake his favorite musical if that's what he wants to do.
At this point, he could just remake Jaws if he wanted. He could remake his own films now that we're so far in. But all right, at number 8, I had Don't Look Up. A film I didn't hate, like a lot of people hated. I just really want Adam McKay to adapt his satire
branch
style.
out.
If he's going to continue to make these political satires, I need a little more finesse. Like I really need him to elevate the way he produces them. I liked this more than Vice because I really did not like Vice, and that's disappointing because I really do not like Dick Cheney at all in the slightest. So Vice should have appealed right to me because it was a skewering of Dick Cheney. Even
as a person who doesn't like Dick Cheney, it also felt very biased.
Very biased because they openly admit, they're like, he's so secretive, we have no facts, so we're just gonna basically make shit up that we think happened.
I want to at least feel like my opinions are informed by real things instead of just made up narratives. I want to
And
feel that way anyways.
And this, I mean, he grabbed the biggest like club to just knock you over the head over and over and over again.
Don't Look Up. Yeah.
With the messaging and Don't Look Up. And it's a message I agree with. Once again, I'm on the same political side as Adam McKay, very clearly. And I agree with this message. We have long ignored issues that are like impending doom upon us. And sometimes you do feel like society just gaslights you because nobody listens. But the way it's handled is so obtuse.
And the way the government is in bed. So one of the things I really did like about Don't Look Up is I thought they did a very good job of basically merging Trump and Hillary Clinton into one Meryl Streep president. And I think it's funny because like then you heard people talking about it and people like, the people who are oblivious were very hard on one side, like, oh, it's clearly clearly a Hillary like caricature. No, it's clearly a Trump character. Guys, it's supposed to be both of them at the same time. They're not clear about if it's a Democrat or Republican intentionally. So I mean I will say that was one thing with the film was I think all the acting performances were really good.
It was nice to see Leonardo DiCaprio take on a different character because he's recently in his career he's really he's settled into a character, and it was nice to see him break back out of that into like this ridiculous humor.
Loved his like awkward little scientist thing, the unassuming suddenly hot geologist or
Let
whatever.
me just say once again, as per usual, Cate Blanchett just snatches anything she's in. She is so damn good.
Did not like those fake teeth though. No, I was not a fan of that choice. I need makeup people in Hollywood to please stop with the fake teeth choices. It's not working.
I don't know what Mark Rylance was doing though. That was a character choice for sure. I thought Jennifer Lawrence was good. I just hated that damn haircut. I know it was a choice. It was an intentional choice to give her that haircut. Actually, one of the gags that made me laugh was her continuing to replay the scenario in her head of like, why would he make me pay for the water? Like, because that's something relatable to people. Like after something happens to you, you're just like, why did they do that? Like, and why didn't I stand up for myself in the moment?
It's also it was also a good metaphor for like what he was going for in the film of like, even when the world is falling apart down apart you still will fixate on these like completely inconsequential but like mind-blowing things, right? Like Will Smith smacking Chris Rock, like realistically not that big a deal in the grand scheme of the world and all our problems, but man, are we fixated on it. I spent days just remembering it and being like, I can't believe that happened.
I mean, it's probably going to be the image for this podcast, so just so you're aware. But yeah, Don't Look Up, it was okay. I just wish I found it funnier. That's the thing. I chuckled here and there. If I had laughed more, I could have forgiven how over the like beating me over the head. I can deal with that if it's funny. I thought Ariana Grande was funny.
She was funny. I didn't mind being beat over the head. I liked Don't Look Up. I enjoyed it when I watched it. My main objection was I was like, this does not belong on the best picture list. Like this is just.
And it's this point, like if Adam McKay makes a political satire, it gets nominated. Like we're at that point. Every single time he makes one of these political satires, it's nominated. Vice was nominated and wasn't good. The Big Short, I love The Big Short. See, that's where I was like, he did so good in that one. And then
he's trying to like transfer that. Bad. And I appreciate it because I think that was a great format. And I don't think it's a bad idea for him to try and replicate the format. But I think one of the problems might be that he's trying to replicate the format but not replicate it. Like he doesn't want to repeat himself.
There's not enough information. I think maybe that's what it is we do have a lot of information on global warming, obviously. But he didn't really infuse it well into the film. Like instead it was more
he made this a full satire. He went full on satire.
Whereas instead of like Short, the reason that works so well is there was a lot of terminology, and that's why he was able to break the fourth wall, because there was a lot that normal people just didn't understand about the bubble and what happened. I also think
he would stick. I would also wish a little bit he would, you were saying about Vice, stick with things that are real and help us understand things. I think that there's incredible power in filmmaking, especially when you have a platform like Adam McKay now has to really show up and be like, no, listen, global warming is a real issue. Let's talk about I think he tried to address global warming, and it's like there isn't like a specific event that happened with global warming, so it's hard for him to talk about this thing that is clearly very important and we all need to think about. I think for me, more than anything else, I was just like with it. Don't Look Up. It was just this like funny but like incredibly depressing sort of examination of what would happen if
I
a
mean,
literal meteor came for us. Like,
a
oh
little
God.
bit of, I mean, and it was interesting.
Because this is a thing that could happen, just so you all know. Like, it is not in any way impossible for a piece of rock in space to come and hit the earth and wipe us out. It's absolutely possible.
And nobody would listen. We saw that with the pandemic. I mean, people were running around screaming and yelling for months. Before people finally were like, oh shit, it's here and we're not prepared. I mean, it's what we do pretty much every time.
Yeah, and that's that's I was just talking to Patrick this morning about his I really hope we were talking about cybersecurity. He's like, I really hope that they take some preventative measures before something catastrophic happens. And I was like, well, that's really not the pattern. So much as I appreciate the sentiment, I would also like us to be more like preventative, especially about problems that are very easily like provable and seeable and you can like examine. But anyways, Don't Look Up was actually my number 7.
Oh, perfect. Well, look at us bouncing back and forth.
Yeah. So it was. I would like to Don't Look Up. I enjoyed watching it. I laughed. I thought it was funny. I enjoyed the satire of it. I just didn't think it belonged on the Best Picture list. And I liked other films better than I did, so that it kind of just got shoved down by default.
I just have one thing to say to you, Ren.
Yes.
Mind your own business, you old fuck. It was the best line. But also, that was me saying it to you directly.
I'm not that much older than
But no, literally the best moment of the entire film was Ariana Grande saying that to Leonardo DiCaprio. I hollered. I died. So, also I loved her songs.
Especially because Ariana Grande, we know like in reality, she's a very sweet, nice human being. Like she would never be like that. So it's fun to see her get to be a character.
Well, coming in at number 7 for me, we're sticking with the trend. We now have the same bottom 4 because I have The Power of the Dog at number 7. Nice. For me, so some people have tried to defend. Honestly, this film should have been tailor-made for me. It's a skewering of toxic masculinity. It's an LGBTQ like centered drama, but not an obvious one. It's not like a pandering queer story. It's more hidden than that. And usually I love stuff like that. I love a slow burn. I'm good with slow burn dramas. I usually am all about it. And I know some other queer people are taking offense to everyone calling it cold, but I'm a queer person and I found it very cold. I'm sorry. It did not, that ending did not resonate with me. The third act also just did not resonate with me.
Saw somebody on a Reddit thread say, yeah, but isn't the whole point that this man literally was murdered because he was gay? And I was like, wow, you deeply understood what happened in that film. And I think that might be part of it, is that like the fact that he was gay was of like relatively little consequence.
Yeah. Like I understand
really had nothing to do with anything.
The manifestation of anger. And I think that's an interesting story to tell because there are plenty. I mean, honestly, I think we saw it done a little bit better in Turning Red with that little boy. I think not really wanting to accept himself and how he dealt with it was lashing out at his little classmates in Turning Red. And I think that's what the film was really he wasn't able to be himself. He wasn't able to live and accept who he was, and thus it manifested itself in a really toxic way of
maybe
behaving.
But also he might have just been an asshole. Like you can also have like I know plenty of queer people who weren't allowed to be queer, that it didn't present in being a piece of shit to everyone around
who've been out since they were little teens that are terrible and not good people at all, and we don't like them.
Yes.
I mean, it was different then. So I understand. I do think it was beautiful. Yay, female cinematographers doing great work. It wasn't as beautiful as Dune, so I'm happy Dune won. But low-key, I'm still happy Dune won. But it was beautiful. I did think the score, it was good for what it was. I think there were better scores as well. It was a well executed technical film on every technical level. It was done well enough.
Technical thing, and this might be I know it was like slightly controversial. So I know they didn't film it in the American West, even though it's set in the American West. New Zealand. But honestly, even while I was watching, I felt like it wasn't quite right. Like there was a could we live in the West, right? You and I live in
We're
the
like
West.
2 states down from Montana, where this is
yeah,
set.
and the other thing is though, we just had Nomadland last year, and that was like iconic. Like that was clearly filmed in the West. So I think just having literally just watched Nomadland, it did feel off
Artificial.
a little bit. It felt like it. I mean, the cinematography was lovely, but it
Beautiful.
didn't quite feel like authentic American. And that was like, I know that was part of Sam Elliott's whole like problem with it, was that it was not filmed actually in the American West.
Woo! Who knew Power of the Dog? I mean, before Will Smith, Power of the Dog was the real drama. Everybody coming out, Jane Campion giving crazy speeches, Sam Elliott popping out the woodwork to talk.
I'm very happy that Power of the Dog did not win Best Picture, because I know it was like a favorite to win for a long time. And it didn't win like anything. Except for Best Director.
And I'm good with her winning Best Director.
I'm okay with her. I am okay with the excitement of like having two women win back to back, which
and a woman,
years and years of men.
Our first multiple nominee of a female director.
Yeah.
Plus, against a lot of these others, I mean, I do think they did a good job, but except Paul Thomas Anderson. Honestly, Paul Thomas Anderson literally stole Denis Villeneuve's spot, but that's I mean, he is the only one I would outright boot from this category, because I don't know why he's here. The other ones I think did a good job directing, but none of them really gave me like, this is the clear best direction out of these 5 nominees. So Jane Campion winning, I'm good. I think
I'm okay with it. Here's my snarky take is, well, she must have done something very well to convince that many people that a film that extremely long and boring was actually brilliant. She must be doing something right.
She did something well.
Good for her.
Well, Ren, we've agreed so far. We have the same 4 on the bottom. What do you have at number 6?
I have King Richard.
Okay.
I didn't. King Richard again was not a movie that I disliked. I disliked the other ones a little bit better. I thought Will Smith was. I mean, it's basically a movie to watch Will Smith in, and it's a lovely feel-good film. I will say, just generally with all of these films, I was really delighted that I did not have to sit through 10 absolutely depressing, slow, miserable films.
Only Power of the Dog.
Only Power of the Dog and Licorice Pizza. Actually, and Licorice Pizza wasn't depressing; it was just boring. But yeah, King Richard was like delightful. I knew I was gonna like King Richard because like the Williams sisters are just fucking badass. Like I was excited to hear about their story because we just know their story is incredible.
One of the best sports stories of all time. Like across any sport, one of the best.
Yeah. So it was great. I think a little part of me is sad that it was not about them as much as it was about their dad. And like, that's okay. Because you know what? Eventually they will make a biopic that focuses on their actual journey, and less on their male figure of their family. I did think, all the performances were really, really good. The kids were really good. But yeah, I think that would be my one gripe about King Richard, which again, it's called King Richard. It's very clear that it's a story about this is the Williams's father and his position in their family, and it was a vehicle for Will Smith. But it is, disappointing because at the end of the day, these 2 extraordinary Black women should be the stars of their own story, and they really aren't in this movie at all.
Well, I have at number 6. I think this is interesting because I think these are 2 number 6s, like just kind of show who we are as people outside of film, and why something like King Richard as a tennis fan just rings more.
Oh yeah.
And Drive My Car as a theater fan rang more true with you because I have Drive My Car at number 6.
We just swapped them. You're like, well, I love tennis, so King Richard wins. I love theater, so Drive My Car wins.
Drive My Car, I did really enjoy. And again, I thought it was a really well-made film. It does go slow moving. I think the second act is where I think we could have tightened it up personally and skimmed down. This is why I know I'm not a theater person, because I was like, I think we could have done with a few less of those theater scenes. We didn't need to be on the stage.
My head no right now.
That was I was like, we could have cut a few of these and still got the point across just fine, but that's just me. I do love that we also have a deaf character in this film who plays a very interesting role. And I think that's what it was, is the script is interesting. It takes you in very interesting ways. It is, once again, a really human story, but a story that respects art. So I can see why the Academy loved it. It's all about art and healing and how art plays a role in your life and bleeds out and it plays a role in grieving and in that whole process. It did have some really out there moments where I was like, what the hell is going on? Why are we fighting people? I mean, I get it, the guy is this, or the wife was really interesting. I don't know. It was interesting. I think I respected it a little bit more than I actually loved it upon like watching it. The only thing was it made me feel more than Power of the Dog, because they were pretty similar for me. Like they were in that same range of like, I respect what's going on. I didn't love watching it per se, but I actually felt watching Drive My Car. I enjoyed these characters. I thought the actors should have been in conversation for the acting categories, but it's not in English, so we can't have that. Only Penelope Cruz. She's the only non-English.
Not in English, but it is in like 4 other languages.
Yeah, I mean, there's a little bit of English in here. We got sign language, like we got things we could do, but no. Japanese spoken language, we can't award them. Korean spoken language.
That's not true, Larry. They gave the woman who was the grandmother in Minari last year won an Oscar.
And her
so they can and they do. They just
her moment with Troy Kotzer, by the way, was so good because she announced him winning in sign language, and then I don't know, she just took such care with him up there that it was just a really sweet moment. And I'm like, bring her back. We need her and the little boy, Alan Kim. We need to see them again because I love them. But Drive My Car, a beautiful film. But yeah, so it's at number 6 for me. Number 5, Ren.
Number 5 for me was Dune.
All right.
I liked Dune. We did a
the whole thing
did a show on it. You can refer to that to hear our thoughts on it. I'm really glad that it swept the technicals. I think that makes a lot of sense for me. It was a gorgeous film. The costumes were incredible. Except for the makeup and hair, which went to Eyes of Tammy Faye, which I also think is incredible.
Costumes and hair and makeup, because Cruella snatched that costume out from it, which I agree. I thought Dune's costumes were gorgeous, but Cruella, come on.
Cruella's costumes were just incredibly creative.
The sound design, the visual effects, the cinematography, the production design. I mean, all the original score.
And just a real quick side note on the makeup thing, I do have to say, as a person who does makeup, the thing about Eyes of Tammy Faye and the makeup in that movie is that the aging was incredible. They did a really good job. It is hard to age people for film. Especially, I think they did such a good job with, really both of them, but especially Andrew Garfield. Yeah, the way they kind of made him a little bit more bloated as he aged was really kind of incredible to look at.
Yeah, because it's easy to just look at Jessica Chastain's face, but there's so much more makeup work going on than just that. Yeah,
the obviously replicating Tammy Faye, they did an incredible job, right? Because Jessica Chastain is a gorgeous woman, and just like
Tammy Faye was over the top and kind of ridiculous.
Exactly. We're used to Jessica Chastain having that elegance about her, right? Like she is rarely gaudy looking in any film. And so I think it absolutely contributed to her performance and was like I'm glad that they both got awarded because the performance overall was a combination of both her talent and their makeup skills. Anyways, Dune, I'm glad. Yes, the cinematography was incredible. Yes, we talked about the music. The soundtrack was incredible. Like, yeah.
Hans Zimmer got his second ever Oscar finally after all these years.
Yeah.
Isn't that weird to think that there's only 2 Oscars of all this time? Honestly, John Williams doesn't have all that many either. So it's like, just because you're iconic, it doesn't mean.
Well, you also have to do a movie that is buzzy. Yes. Is Oscar buzzy. So it doesn't matter if it's an Oscar-worthy music every single time.
For better or worse, it's interesting.
Part of a bigger piece. Yeah,
I'm glad that Hans Zimmer won for this film because, for better or worse, nobody can argue Hans Zimmer, particularly around Inception and the Dark Knight trilogy, pretty much rehauled blockbuster score. I mean, he completely redefined it and everybody started copying Hans Zimmer and what he did. with original score. And I think Dune still has that grandiose, but he elevated it, I think. So I'm glad he went for this, something big and grand. But then we have like bagpipes, we have these chants, these weird, cool chants. So I'm glad he won. But yes, Dune.
So what was yours?
So coming in at number 5 for me was Nightmare Alley.
Okay.
Nightmare Alley was a film I really enjoyed. I think some people don't love the third act. I love the third act. I think the third act is amazing.
And everything unravels. Yes, that's the whole point of the movie.
And from all accounts I've heard, is a pretty dramatic step up from the original Nightmare Alley film, is how Guillermo del Toro does this. Plus, it just plays so perfectly into his strengths. That third act just kills it. The performances were all fantastic. I thought Bradley Cooper, once again, is amazing. He's the next one. He's been nominated, I believe, now 12 or 13 times because he produces
he
so much.
I'm like, isn't he in like half of the Best Picture nominees?
I personally think he should have beaten Rami Malek and won for A Star Is Born. I thought his performance was better, and that's where I would have given him his Oscar.
Because that movie was trash.
Rami Malek should not have won. I'm sorry. I like him as a person, but he should not have that Oscar. It should be Bradley's. But one of these days, Bradley Cooper, you have to win sometime. You and Glenn Close now, you two have to win at some point in your life.
He also does an incredible job of like picking his parts. And at this point in his career, he's like, nope, I'm Bradley Cooper. I can do what I want.
And he's great in Nightmare Alley. He's wonderful. Yeah. Cate Blanchett is amazing as per usual. Come again. And as we talked about, it's Guillermo del Toro at his visual best for sure. Like the cinematography is stunning in this film. The production design is amazing. That's the one I would have taken away from Dune and given to Nightmare Alley, would have been production design personally. But
there's so many more details in Nightmare Alley that just the amount of work that was going into it, I know must have been just like a different level. I mean,
the only thing is that second act drags for me a bit. That's where the script kind of just is at its weak point. There's a lull through that second act where I was a little like, okay, we need to get back to something going on a little bit. I think we spent too much time in this general area of the con setup. I think we can move past it. So that's really the only thing that keeps Nightmare Alley out of the top 4. But obviously, I mean, number 5 is a good place to be.
Yeah. So
number 4 for you, Ren.
Drive My Car. Woo! I was riveted the whole 3 hours, which I was not expecting. I was expecting to be very bored and depressed the whole time I watched this movie. And then I think about 10 minutes in, I realized, oh my God, this is just a theater nerd film. Oh my God. I got like excited and just really engaged. I tried to kind of explain to Patrick a little bit, because he wasn't watching it. I would not make him sit down and watch it. It's not his type of film, like why I was excited about it. And like this whole Chekhov angle, it's so theater kid. Like if you went to school for theater and you took script analysis classes and you read Chekhov, like Larry, nobody wants to go see Chekhov. There is not an audience for Chekhov outside of the theater nerds who like understand all of the layers and all of the backstory and all of the things going on. But like once you kind of understand a lot of that, it's not as it helps you understand Drive My Car a lot more too, and the parallels that are being drawn there of like there's like even though there's like that scene where they're both in the car and it's just this long scene, both of them. There's actually lots of scenes where it's just like I'm just telling a story for a while. It's a lot more common in like a Chekhov where it's just like, oh, there's just this long monologue about this thing in my life that's supposed to be a metaphor for this bigger thing I'm feeling. And that's why actors love it, because it is so juicy from an acting standpoint to like pick that shit apart. And I think that's the other part of it. Like they go into all of the like rehearsal rooms and things, and they talk about like where these unique connections happen. I also really loved that like his way of making theater was really interesting. And like I think I like that, not a lot of people think about like what goes into making a play and what goes into building characters, and every director has their own sort of angle. It was really interesting just to like hear them talk about all of this stuff, and like him, I was trying to explain to Patrick, and then in the middle of the film, he actually says why he doesn't want to play this Uncle Vanya character because Chekhov has a way of pulling out the truth of your own soul, and I can't do it anymore. And that's like, yes, from a like theater kid standpoint. You said it so perfectly. And like, I know 100% that I liked this film personally. For me, I would not recommend it across the board for everyone in the same way, because I think it is, unless you're gonna get the joy of those little moments as a theater person, you won't be as engaged for the entirety of this film, which is very long. But I was riveted the whole time. And that was one of the things that was like my complaint about Licorice Pizza, was that we're similar lengths, but like Drive My Car, just I followed the story of the characters. The characters were all really consistent. Another thing that I think that Chekhov does, that it was similar in this film, is there are these like sudden like, whoa, what the fuck moments that like keep the story moving forward. It's like this, oh shit, this crazy fucking thing just happened.
And I was just shook.
Yeah.
I was like, where the oh, okay.
Yeah. And that, but like, it's interesting, right? And I think that's one of the talents of Chekhov, and like the things that was kind of like replicated in this film is that like it would be very long and boring if not for these sudden moments of complication that draw you further in, these sudden moments of conflict, or these like deep simmering moments that explode into something bigger and then keep moving. So I, from a theater kid standpoint, I just loved all of the Chekhov fangirling. I'm not even that big of a Chekhov fan, but like it is such a big part of theater history. And for everyone here who's ever heard of method acting, like Chekhov and Stanislavski, those are the grandfathers of the form of acting we all enjoy today, which is realistic and tries to get to the heart of it. And so that's another big part of what this film does, is it really talks a lot about like how art gets to the heart of things and how we ourselves as like individuals get to the heart of it. So I loved it, thought it was really good, really enjoyed it. It only got pushed down because there were other things that I enjoyed watching a little bit more.
All right. Well, at number 4 for me, I have Best Picture winner, Coda. Chilling at number 4. It just was obviously a universal story that I think, while not being universal in its actual subject matter, was universal in, themes and stuff that most of us can relate to. And I think that's ultimately why it won Best Picture, is that it handled that subject with care, from what I've heard behind the scenes, though there is controversy from within the deaf community. Willing to hear all that out, certainly. Obviously, don't want to silence people from within the community the film is highly centered on. But I just thought it was really a sweet film with really strong performances from everyone in the cast. I thought all of them. The brother has kind of been an unsung hero. I thought he was great.
I thought he was great.
Troy Kotzer were wonderful as her parents. Amelia Jones in her little breakout role. And I always love Eugenio Derbez in everything, because he's just as over the top and a delight.
Because he's a movie star version of you, Larry.
There you go.
Especially in this film.
It's just outrageous, but I live for most of his characters. No, it's sweet. It's fun. It's honestly, it just, again, made me feel, and as cold and heartless as I usually am, movies that like get to me emotionally, resonate with me, usually stick with me longer every now and then, because I love a good cinematography. And at the end of the day, well, you'll see as we get closer to the top of this list, there's a movie that a lot of people think is very hollow and doesn't have much feeling that I adore, and that's sometimes the case too. But from a technical standpoint, is Coda on the level of most of these films? No, absolutely not. And none of us are going to sit here and argue with you that it is. For a Best Picture winner, no. It's not. It has probably the worst cinematography out of the 10.
It's not bad
It's not
cinematography. It's
ugly.
just
Like
like
people who
not
are
a
saying
feature.
Hallmark and Lifetime. No, please. Clearly, you have not
No.
watched a Hallmark movie
They
in
just
some
call it
time.
Hallmark and Lifetime because there was emotion and sentimentality and there wasn't a miserable fucking ending.
Yeah, like no, you have not actually sat down to watch a TV film or even a Netflix film because other than, they come up with Power of the Dog, but then they'll give you He's All That. And if
Yes.
you dare think Coda is on the same technical filmmaking level as those, I don't know what to tell you because it's not. No, and it was a nice story. What can I say? I enjoyed watching it more than I enjoyed watching most of the other films lower down on this list. So I liked Coda.
So Coda was my number
Oh,
3.
perfect.
Um, I uh I just enjoyed it. I like it was a nice, lovely story. I 100% echo what you feel like. I like movies that make me feel things, and the movie made me feel things. It made me feel joy. It made me feel sadness. It made me feel frustration. It made me laugh. It made me laugh a lot, and I really love to like find joy in the films that I watch. I was entertained thoroughly throughout the film, and I think that to me is really important, especially with the prominence of movies like Power of the Dog, and the continuing popularity of the slow burn. I think sometimes the need to entertain the audience gets lost, and so I really just I'm delighted when something like that happens. I also hardly would call this like a Hallmark film or a Lifetime film because the performances are top tier. Like the characters are each so good. Everyone in the family is incredible, and the relationships they have with each other are so complicated. I also really love. I love. I'm so sick of seeing dysfunctional relationships in film, and it was really nice that the mother and the father are just like a married couple that wants to like fuck each other's brains out
And
nonstop.
also,
And
so that's something also I think that gets lost is you know deafness is not really, it doesn't present itself, it's not a visible
yeah,
disability at first, at least, and then so even them though, anyone with a disability being treated as a sexual being, being treated
yes,
as alive, and parents, we're getting to a point where parents are more and more seen as still sexually alive, but to get deaf parents who are just like, nah girl, we're gonna do what we want, like go on, you're a
are
high
like,
school
yeah,
senior.
and then they talk about that too, right? Like you have the character who says
Yeah.
you have this perfect life where your parent and right, and it was these great moments too. I think you get a lot of coming of age stories. This was a really interesting coming of age story, a very unique coming of age story. And I think I understand. So the main qualm I've heard from the deaf community is that for a movie about deaf people, they would have preferred that the protagonist, the main character, was one of the deaf characters, which I understand. At the same time, everybody deserves to have their story told, and the child of a deaf family is going to have a very specific sort of struggle that other people aren't. Like my one of my friends, she was the child of deaf parents, and I immediately thought of her and like the things that she told me about like the struggles and the way that that affected how she grew up and what she's dealing with even now in terms of trauma. um like it's there, it doesn't everybody has a story and everybody has a trauma and everybody has like something that is relevant. And just because I've never seen another film that's about the children of deaf people, so I don't think that there's anything wrong with
I
us
mean, and
telling this story.
we still
um
haven't seen a film with this many deaf actors in prominent roles
yes.
at the forefront like this.
And
That's the other thing.
additionally, yeah, and Sound of Metal was a great movie last year that did a great job. They're kind of like two peas in a pod, I think, a little
Mhm.
bit. They both had this very similar like, and it's a, from a storytelling perspective, it's a very juicy sort of dichotomy of having people that are passionate about music
Yeah.
with people
Yes.
that cannot hear, right? It's gonna create a conflict
An
no matter
interesting
what,
conflict.
an interesting conflict. And that, from a storytelling perspective, I understand why the story was told this way, and this was the story that was told. And I think there was another thing that was delightful about the story was the musical aspect of it. Like this girl, thank God they got a girl with some good pipes. Like it was really
Yes.
enjoyable to listen to her. I will say I went and auditioned for colleges when I was in a little acting major. And that was some straight up fucking cheating that also they do like that. I think that was my first like response was like, no, oh my God, you would never show up for your audition without your music. Are you fucking kidding me?
Yeah.
Oh my God, they would never be like, okay, you'll just have to sing a cappella. They would never let a random person come into the room and just be like, I'll accompany her. Like that just wouldn't happen. And also, they absolutely would not let you sing the whole song. They get 16 bars and then they cut you off and then you're done. Doesn't matter how
Yeah.
good you are, how inspiring your story is. So that was really my only qualm
Yeah,
with
I mean,
Coda was that like
it goes through the feel good beats. I mean,
Yeah.
you know, it is what it is. It goes through the feel good. But part of what I think, and I have heard that they thought that the story framed, you know, deaf people as a burden on their hearing family members. And that's another criticism I've heard. But and again, I can understand that, but I do think
sure,
they
but I also
fleshed out
disagree that
I
that was
thought they
what it
fleshed out the
was.
family well
Yeah.
enough that they were their own characters dealing with their own problems. And they
Yeah, I
were
also right. Well, because especially because you had the brother character who. Okay, so really, to me, you can have that criticism at the same time. I don't think I necessarily agree with it because I think every family puts the members of their family into these boxes, and it is there. It's not just deaf parents that
will
can
do
lean
that.
too hard on their children.
I mean, we just saw it with Encanto.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think it's a very like common thing just like among families to put your siblings, to put your family members into these specific roles and then have to deal with it and the problems that come around when they don't fit in those roles anymore or those roles don't suit them, don't serve them.
And there's a time I feel like all of us feel somewhat to one point to another that someone in our family is a burden on us at our point. We don't admit it, as you know, we don't talk about it, but and it has nothing to do with your abilities or anything. It could be literally any reason. You're just like, I need to shake my family right now. Like everyone has that moment, you know.
It also can be a larger sort of like thematic thing of like our parents' shit falls onto us, right? One that maybe was a little bit more explicit in Coda, but like absolutely, there's plenty of films that just talk about the way that there's generational trauma is a very popular theme right now, and our parents' bullshit ends up just like causing us problems one way or the other. And I think they also did a very good job of addressing that, like the burden aspect of it by having the brother be like, you need to go because I can do this and I deserve the right to be capable to have a role for you to go out. I do definitely agree. I thought the brother was a little underutilized. I think his story seems really, really interesting. And I love that actor. I thought he was really, really good. But yeah, I really liked Coda. I thought it was a super fun, engaging, and moving piece of film.
Moving from the one hated feel-good movie of cinephiles to the next. At number 3, I have Belfast. So Belfast started out as the OG Coda for the cinephile community early in award season when it had a lot of steam and it seemed like Belfast was on its way to a Best Picture win. People hated. I mean, they came hard for Belfast, but it kind of fell off. It started to not be as big of a contender, so they left it alone and switched to Coda. So Belfast got shelved and people stopped talking about it altogether. But honestly, what I love with Belfast and what puts it above something like Coda for me and a lot of the other films is just, I mean, it's such a personal story. And you could evidently tell that this is Kenneth Branagh's love letter to his family, to his home, to his life, to Ireland. I mean, the whole thing, to Belfast. It's a Kenneth Branagh love letter, and he executed it in that way. It is made with love. You can feel his passion behind it. And I think that really elevates all the material, and it made it really resonate in a way that a lot of these other films just didn't. And I think that's why Kenneth Branagh did deserve to be in that Best Director lineup. I think he did deserve to be in the Best Screenplay lineup, and he ended up winning because you could feel it. I love his use of color when little baby Kenneth Branagh stand-in was experiencing film and art. His whole world came into color.
Yes.
I loved that. I thought Jamie Dornan and Catriona Balfe were wonderful as his parents. Ciarán Hinds and Judi Dench, wonderful as his grandparents.
Yes.
That little boy was a revelation. He was adorable and fantastic in this lead role. My only problem with Belfast, I watched it twice actually in theaters, once at the Denver Film Festival, and then I watched it again. And my second acts are tricky for me, I think. That's where the story really usually kind of falters. And I think Belfast, upon second watch, it faltered a little bit for me in the second act, partially because I think it doesn't do the rioting stuff quite well enough. So I think when it's about the family and when it's about the kid, it really sings off the page. When we transition to the like gangstery riot, which you have to include when you're talking about Belfast, Ireland at this time, period. It just, I don't know, like the neighbors weren't really developed at all. They were pretty like stand-in, we're gonna take down this community and cause problems for the protagonist family, without any sort of depth to them, or like stealing from that little supermarket and all that, like that kind of stuff. That's where I could have left it a little bit, but everything else I thought was so well done. Jamie Dornan singing to his wife is like one of the best moments in film of 2021. It was such a like magical romantic movie moment.
I'm glad Jamie Dornan has been able to ascend above his 50 Shades of Grey time. That role, he was paid I was about to say forced, but I was like, paid very well to do.
Paid very well to also then deny a full frontal scene because of his weird reasons. And we're like, bruh, you know what you signed on for. What are you doing? But that's neither here nor there, Jamie Dornan. You got away with it, trying to charge him an extra $1 million over Dakota Johnson or whatever it was you were doing to do more nudity. But no, as for this, I think it's a delight film, and
Belfast
I think
was your number 3.
Yes, this was my number 3, and we need to get past feel good equals bad movie. Like that's what I want the film community to get past. Just because it's happy, just because it's not so deep and so like, depressing.
Yeah, it feels like
still be good.
Not that feel good equals bad movie, but that depressing equals Oscar worthy. Like, I must be emotionally devastated at the end of a film for this to qualify as an Oscar-worthy film.
Yeah.
And I think, and it's silly because it's just like, that's not been historically what happens. Like lots of not devastating films have won Best Picture in the past. I think it was just like a pattern that emerged, and then it seems
like there just can't be happiness. Like even when you look at recent ones, I mean, Green Book is the outlier. We all shun it. But the rest, but like Nomadland, it's not necessarily depressing. It just doesn't have emotion to it. It's just this kind of a blank feeling film. Parasite isn't depressing. I mean, Parasite is very emotionally charged, but for lots of different reasons than I live. But happy is not really one of them. So I feel like happiness, they just don't want happy. They don't want happy. If a film is happy and wins Best Picture, they get mad or is in contention.
Well, it might as well be in the animation category at that point.
All right, Ran, what's in your runner-up spot then?
My runner-up spot is Nightmare Alley. We did an episode on it, so you can hear all of my very detailed thoughts on it. But I mean, it does, like, again, my rankings are my personal rankings. Has a lot more to do with me specifically than like what. I don't know, but that's the thing is all the voters. It is also all of the votes are also personal, so it's not like I have some like set of criteria that like gives me like, oh, let me score this and this. Nightmare Alley for me personally was just like gorgeous to watch. I just so thoroughly enjoyed the experience of looking at the film, of watching all the performances, of that interesting noir vibe just playing out on the screen. I also got extra special points for being set in Buffalo. So yeah, I just loved Nightmare Alley, and I think I generally am always gonna like have a special little boost on any Guillermo del Toro films, just because I think he gets me. I think him and like Greta Gerwig, they like get me. I like watch the movies and go, oh my god, they got me. I didn't want to like Greta Gerwig for a long time, and I was like, oh no, she gets me.
Fine, I'll give in to you, Greta.
Especially, yeah, it was like Lady Bird. I was like, oh wow, this is really my life. And then saw Little Women. Right, I was like really skeptical about Little Women and was like, I don't know, because I had very strong feelings about it. And then she did it, and I was like, oh, she gets me.
Yeah,
no, I know. So yeah, Nightmare Alley. It's such a fucking gorgeous film to look at. It's sumptuous for the eyes.
Well, at number 2, I cap off my run of feel goods. The feel good movies ran 4 through 2 for me, and I have King Richard. Again, I'm a like mega Venus and Serena fan.
Yes.
And I too actually was skeptical. I was like, oh, why are we doing this? But so I was nervous. They actually did a really good job at staying very accurate. It's a very accurate depiction all the way across the board of what happened, the events. Some people think it was a little bit of caricature, but I'm like, Richard Williams himself was a character, y'all. Like, he was much like Tammy Faye. People think that Jessica Chastain was like this caricature. No, she was not. Look at the real woman, please. And the same thing here. Look at Richard Williams. He was outrageous and over the top and quite annoying.
Film about a whole person, they're gonna need to be a pretty like extraordinary person,
a very divisive person. The little girls also looked so eerily similar to like little baby Venus and Serena. I was like, Jesus. And they were great. I thought they gave great performance. Aunjanue Ellis. Oh, what
I will say, I did not realize how much more Venus kind of was the star in their childhood. I had no concept of that. I guess I kind of forgot, right? Like,
she was the older one. She kind of came
first. I mean,
they're
about the same age as me. So like, I was kind of like growing up at the same time that they were blowing up and being incredible. But I think I saw such as that Serena has been GOAT
so dominant for so long
that I just assumed Serena was the rock
she
star.
Snatched that crown quick from her.
Well, and then I had to look it up. I was like, what happened? Why isn't Venus as GOAT? And then read about like her health issues and was like, oh, that fucking sucks. And again,
partially she had to contend with her sister. Most of her Grand Slam losses came at the hands of Serena Williams. So
right, and I'm so like eventually they'll tell that story, and I'm excited to hear that one as well. Of like, because there's a lot to be dug into.
A lot still to go. That story
with
was just
their relationship and them. Yeah, right. Like that was just them as
kids. Sister was murdered. One of the sisters we saw in this.
Oh my god,
gets murdered.
Oh my god.
Later in life, the one that stays in Compton in a drive-by. So I mean, there's a lot to go still. The whole controversy at Indian Wells where they started yelling racial slurs because Venus had to pull out of a tournament. I mean, yeah, they have a lot to go.
Sorry, this is an audio medium. My eyes just went wide and my jaw dropped because I've never heard that story, and that's fucking appalling. Like, we all know that tennis is a very, very white sport, which is one of the things that King Richard did a good job of pointing out. I think everybody kind of knew this, but also I don't think we think about it that hard. There are two sports that are incredibly that are not actively meant to keep out people of color, but do both mostly by virtue of like how prohibitively expensive they are and how like exclusive and classist they end up being. Tennis is one of them, and golf is the other one. I was
So,
actually
I
just
mean,
ranting
I thought they
about
did
how
a
we should
great
just
job.
get rid of golf courses because it's an outrageous amount of water and land being wasted on richness.
Yeah, at least tennis courts, like, nobody who comes off of these beaten down glass covered tennis courts in Compton. Like that's
Yeah.
just what makes their story so amazing.
Yes.
I
Yeah.
also thought it was really, the editing for me really stands out in King Richard because I think it does such a good job of balancing, like the editing of the tennis matches is done so well and it's really like energetic. But then when it pulls out of those, it doesn't maintain this like hyper energetic like madness. It just kind of moves the story. So I think on a technical level, it doesn't get quite as much credit as maybe it deserved as well. But I loved King Richard a lot more than I thought because I went in quite skeptical. I was ready to like, look, as a fan, I was like, what are we doing here? But I ended up loving it. And I think that's why it impressed me more than I imagined. So it made it up
I
there.
do feel like, just as a general side note, Hollywood has progressively been doing a much better job, and maybe the internet is to credit for this, of taking beloved stories, let's just say beloved stories, and translating them in a way that actually makes the people who love them feel like, oh,
except
great.
you, Bohemian Rhapsody. But
Except
no,
was trash. And well, that was the part because they didn't stick to the story. They were like, let's dramatize it. I'm like, no, thank you. He was wonderful and his band loved him and he would never do such a thing. And what the fuck is wrong with you? And oh my God, how fucking dare you literally erase his bisexuality. You sons of bitches. That was appalling. Anyway,
I know Freddie Mercury fans across the world gasped. Like, that was. I don't know what the members of Queen told you behind the scenes, but yes. All right. What comes in at number one, Ren?
Number one for me was Belfast. I don't understand how a bunch of cinephiles didn't love Belfast. It was a love letter to film. Like typically that's the one that everybody like swoons over. That's one of your like guarantee Oscar nominations sort of like angles, is just be a nerd about movies and then people will give you an Oscar nomination. I just loved it. I actually watched it on St. Patrick's Day. So it was like a little Irish history lesson. Patrick had never heard anything about the Troubles. So that was a really interesting thing, was for him to learn about this, which is crazy. And it's a thing that is really very recent in time, and it was interesting to see the very beginning of it and how it affected it. And then also like, so I also watched the Derry Girls and highly recommend it. Everybody should check it out. It's really funny, very very adorable, and it takes place in like the 90s when the Troubles are still going on. So like this thing happened for like 30 years and like rocked this place. And I think it was really interesting, I think, to get this historical context for a thing that I knew happened, but I had no real like background on like what happened, why it happened. And so I thought that Belfast did an interesting job. I also saw Belfast compared to To Kill a Mockingbird in the way that it takes a really difficult topic and a very fraught topic, and it puts it through the perspective of a child, which really, I think that was another thing that I really liked about it, is that it really, when you do that, it gives it some objectivity that you wouldn't otherwise get. Because, right, like in To Kill a Mockingbird, Scout doesn't really have a concept of racism as it permeates her town. She just, so that when she's, we're absorbing as she is what's happening, we are just as confused and shocked as this child is. And I think Belfast isn't quite To Kill a Mockingbird, but I mean, like, it is this incredibly crucial piece of Kenneth Branagh's story. I think that was another thing that I really loved about it, was that like I knew that it was his story, and it made me love Kenneth Branagh a little bit more, that he, like as you said, the love is there. And I think that's again where I'm like, why didn't the cinephiles love it? It's like this clear like love letter to film. And right, like I loved that everything comes alive when he's watching a movie, when he goes to the theater and he sees Christmas Carol. And there's a story he's told before in interviews about like how that's this thing that like struck a chord with him. And Judi Dench was so good with her little monologue at the end. I love that he had these incredibly good looking parents that were just straight like Gene Kelly, Grace Kelly, Fred Astaire, and then he like had them dance and sing, and it was like it wasn't knock you over the head, but it was this like feeling of classic films that he loved kind of woven into this story of his childhood.
Like you said, how like I think we talked about it off camera a little bit of like how he viewed his parents as just
yes, and that's,
people.
again, that was another thing that I really like about it, is that like it showed, again from a child's perspective, but this very complicated but ultimately loving relationship between his parents, right? Like this dad who fucked up and is trying to make it right, and then she fucks up trying to make it right again, and like
yeah.
But like it's like two loving parents, but they're still struggling, right? Like they still have fights, they still like have to like figure out their world and their life. I think there was also just like a lot of like really interesting things there about like home, what is home, and like what do you do when your home becomes an unsafe place. So I think it was also especially relevant because this was like not that long after the invasion of Ukraine, and it just like sort of
when you watched it.
Yeah. And so it becomes extra relevant in this idea of like, this is the place where you live, and at what point does it become unlivable? This place that is home, when does it become unlivable? I just thought it was a beautiful film, and I really enjoyed watching it the whole way through. It like just struck all my little chords, and I thought that kid was just so goddamn cute. So just the like most charming little child actor since the kid in Minari. What was his name? You know his name, right?
Alan Kim.
Yes, of course you do. You have them memorized.
I love
so
him.
Good. So Belfast is my favorite. I just enjoyed it thoroughly. I also thought Belfast was my favorite in terms of like, in addition to being a really enjoyable film that like struck a chord with me internally, I thought it was just like a beautifully made technical film, and just a piece of film in a way that like Coda was not.
And it's nice to see Kenneth Branagh making a film like this again, because he's coming off some rocky territory. I mean, he made Artemis Fowl with Judi Dench as well, and that was absolutely wretched. So I'm glad to see him bounce back with Belfast.
I know, and he's been doing so many of these like big blockbuster type films
with the Death on the Nile now.
Yeah, which
nice.
I appreciate. Yeah, but I'm happy for him that he like, when he sat down and did something personal, it came out and was a really good piece of film,
and it got the recognition. So yeah, I mean, people are too hard on Belfast, but
too hard on Belfast.
Well, my number one is Dune. If you listen to our top movies of 2021 or any of that, this shouldn't be a surprise, as it was the only one of these films in my top 5 for that podcast we did. I just loved Dune. I don't know. I'm a fantasy nerd. Fantasy is like my weak spot in film.
You're
generally
not just a fantasy nerd. You're a sweeping, epic fantasy nerd. You're like, give me the drama.
I love high fantasy specifically.
Which is why I told him to watch Wheel of Time, and he loved it.
And I loved it. So, and this is definitely heavy sci-fi. Kind of like, it takes Star Wars to a different level. Star Wars obviously inspired by Dune in the first place. But it's a sci-fi.
It's not about dune buggies.
Yeah, Francis, no, sir. But I really thought, so just watching the original film, I just think obviously this one does everything better than that. That one has a certain level of camp that I can appreciate, and ridiculousness that I can appreciate, and weirdness, but I just felt so much more invested. Maybe that's why, because people who aren't familiar with the books, they're not familiar with the other iterations, find it cold. but I actually think that Denis Villeneuve did a much better job than we've seen even the author do in bringing actual people to life. Like these, that maybe they're still not quite these super charismatic, super like endearing, emotional people, but I actually cared about like the Atreides and what was happening within their family more. I think we need to get rid of this idea that somebody like Timothy Chalamet, because he's skinny and I don't know, indie boy, can't be a leading man in a actiony type of film. Which, if you thought Dune was an action film, I don't know. I don't
It's
really.
barely.
There's a couple moments where people run around, a little gunshots every now and again, but for about over 2 hours of it, it is not an action film. And I think Timothy Chalamet is just fine. Skinny boys can be leads in action movies. I'm tired.
He also makes a lot of sense in
This,
he's supposed to be like 18. He's supposed to be like a kid.
and he's
like,
not supposed to be this action star. Like that's not who Paul
not.
Atreides is. It just was so dumb. That discourse was terrible. I was like, are you
Total
kidding
emo
me?
boy makes 100% sense for Paul Atreides.
It was a good casting choice.
Yes.
But also we got great casting choices as like Jason Momoa completely bringing a character
Yeah.
to life that nobody cares
Yep.
otherwise. Oscar Isaac was great as the father. Yes. Rebecca Ferguson, amazing. Everybody was amazing. And then just I was completely swept up into it. I was on board. I was on that damn sand planet, Arrakis. I was ready to go. I loved it. It was my favorite viewing experience of them. It like you with Drive My Car. Other people might have found it a slog and boring, but that 2.5 hours just flies by for me. I am in it the whole way. Plus, I like political intrigue in my fantasy. That's another thing people find to be so boring.
I'm less into that personally.
Yeah,
You're gonna
a lot of people think it's boring. I'm into the world building. I'm into political stuff, and when you plug it in, I'm usually on board. Thus, this was my life for so long, and
political stuff
was me.
One of my things I didn't like as much about Game of Thrones when I was reading it. I was like, I don't care.
And I'm on board. Some of these little side adventures right now in the books, well, but no, the political stuff, I love it. I'm all about it. But yeah, I love Dune. I know it's the blockbuster choice of these awards, but you got to give blockbusters a chance, Frances.
I was gonna say, I don't know. I mean, I guess it's technically a blockbuster, but also it's not.
And that's the
too
thing.
Slow with not enough explosions.
So people were arguing. They're like, okay, you all want comic book movies, but you have Dune that made over $400 million and cost all this money. Dune is not a comic. It's not really. I mean, by definition, yes, it's a blockbuster, I guess, because it cost a lot of money to make it and it's big, but it does not play out like a blockbuster film. Like scale wise, sure. Everything else, not so much. So
like Hans Zimmer doesn't do blockbusters, right? Like there's a certain level of
it's like Christopher Nolan. Whereas Christopher Nolan, yes, technically like Inception is a blockbuster. Even that has way more action and like craziness going on than Dune.
I wouldn't classify Inception as a blockbuster either.
It's big, but it's like it's a think piece. You really have to concentrate all the way through Inception.
It depends on your definition of a blockbuster. Yeah, I think in my mind, a blockbuster is something that's like specifically designed to make a lot of money and and appeal to a very broad audience.
Yeah.
I don't know if Dune would fall into that category. I don't think Denis Villeneuve was making it and trying to think of ways of making it as broadly entertaining to as many people as possible. I think he was definitely doing it and thinking, how do I make this art that these nerds will not be upset about?
Kind of like he did with Blade Runner 2049, which is also a big movie. It's big, it's grand, but Denis was like,
I have to assume he's also a nerd. Like I have to assume that if these are the movies he's deciding to make, that he's probably kind of a nerd.
Yeah, he makes big movies, but not like Arrival's not a blockbuster. And that's his other big one. Like that's the kind of, he makes sci-fi, but he doesn't like make Star Wars really. I mean, it doesn't make the accessible sci-fi. He makes different types of science fiction films.
No, yeah, I feel like a blockbuster is like, it's like there has to be some level of explosions involved for me to even start to classify it as a blockbuster.
But, all right, y'all. That was it. That was our recap and little discussion of the slap and everything else that happened at the
The
Oscars.
Oscars and
I
all of the
just
Best
love
Picture nominees.
everybody will know now. Like no other slap in history matters anymore.
It
Like
was
when
the
you say
slap
the
heard
slap,
round the world.
everyone will instantly know you're talking about the Oscars 2022 when you say the slap. And yes, that was our best picture ranking. Make sure you like, rate, follow on whatever platform you're listening, and follow us over on Twitter and Instagram at Cinema Snarks. Ren, where can people find you?
You can find me on Twitter at Ren Manley. If you really want to scream at me and avoid. You can also find me on Instagram at RennyPoo13.
Perfect. And you can find me at Chili Boy YT on Twitter and Chili Boy Productions on YouTube and Instagram. Well, can't wait to get snarky with y'all again on the next one. But until then, we'll see you later.
Bye.